Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got three tales of people who let their emotions override common sense with wildly different consequences. One involves a man who called the police over a dead battery in his parking spot, another a stepmother who demanded a front row seat she didn't earn, and the last a neighbor who tried to burn down a house because she didn't like snakes. Here we go. My neighbor at work reported my broken down car as suspicious and tried to have it impounded. A few years ago, I briefly worked at a screen printing factory tucked into a crowded business plaza. The plaza was one of those industrial clusters with multiple warehouses and small factories sharing a massive parking lot. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and the lot was large enough that even on busy days there were plenty of empty spaces. There were no assigned spots, no reserved signage, no painted names on asphalt, just a sea of identical rectangles for people to park their cars and go about their day. At the time, I was driving my mom's old sedan. It wasn't flashy, but it got me from point A to point B most days. One afternoon during lunch break, I went out to grab something from the car, turned the key, and nothing happened. Dead. Not even a weak click. I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't panicking either. A coworker who lived near me offered to give me a ride home, and I cleared it with my boss to leave the car overnight until I could arrange a tow. He waved it off easily. No problem, he said. Happens to everyone. The next morning, he walked up to me with a smirk and said, "Your car is causing drama." Apparently, my dead vehicle had been parked in what one of the neighboring business employees considered his favorite spot. That's how my boss described it. His exact words were, "You parked in his favorite spot." I still struggle to understand how someone develops an emotional attachment to a slab of asphalt that has zero distinguishing features. There were no handicap markings, no reserve signs, no proximity perks. It wasn't shaded, it wasn't closer to any entrance, and it wasn't any wider than the others. It was just there. My boss found it hilarious, especially since the guy worked for a company he already didn't get along with. "Just get it handled before he whines anymore," he said, still amused. When the workday ended, something felt off. People were gathered by the windows instead of heading straight to their cars. Outside, there were 3 or 4 police cruisers blocking sections of the parking lot. A guy was animatedly gesturing at one of the officers. At first, we assumed there had been a theft or a fight, something serious enough to warrant multiple police cars. Nope. Parking spot dude had called the cops. He reported my vehicle as suspicious and attempted to have it impounded because it had been sitting in his spot for less than 24 hours. I almost felt bad for the officers who had clearly expected something far more dramatic. The cop he was complaining to looked exhausted, like a parent dealing with a sugar-crashed toddler. I walked out cautiously, already uneasy. I don't love interacting with police. I have some minor priors from my younger, dumber days, and being pointed at by an angry man yelling, "That's him! That's his car!" didn't exactly calm my nerves. Parking spot dude looked like he'd just identified a fugitive. The officer approached me calmly and asked for my license. I explained that the battery had died and I was arranging a tow. He glanced at the car, nodded, and said, "Okay, that's fine." There was no tension in his voice. He clearly understood that having mechanical issues is not a criminal offense. Parking spot dude, however, was not satisfied. He hovered nearby, trying to insert himself into the conversation. "Aren't you going to ticket him?" he demanded. "Can't he be arrested for this?" The officer sighed deeply and replied, "Sir, it's not illegal to have a dead battery." His tone carried the subtle edge of someone trying very hard to remain professional. That should have been the end of it. Instead, parking spot dude escalated. He began ranting about corruption and incompetence, accusing the police of failing to uphold the law because they wouldn't tow a legally parked car in a shared lot. He stamped his foot at one point, a grown man, probably in his 40s, stomping in frustration over a parking space. He stamped his foot, a grown man, stomping at a cop because someone's dead battery inconvenienced his imaginary parking claim? That's not a dispute anymore, that's a performance. Everyone from our building stood there watching the spectacle. My coworkers were openly laughing. Even some employees from his own company peeked out to witness the meltdown. Eventually, he realized no one was siding with him. He threw one last insult at the officer and stormed back into his building. The police left without so much as writing down my information. They clearly had more important things to do than referee a dispute over unmarked asphalt. As embarrassed as I felt having all that attention directed at me, the overall mood among my coworkers was disbelief at how someone could unravel so dramatically over a parking spot. Out of spite, I left the car there another day before arranging the tow. It wasn't blocking traffic, it wasn't breaking rules, and there was something deeply satisfying about knowing that my dead sedan was living rent-free in that man's head. A few weeks later, I heard through the Plaza grapevine that parking spot dude had been let go. Between calling the police over nothing and causing a scene that dragged multiple businesses into unnecessary chaos, his employer had apparently reached their limit. I can only imagine the conversations that happened behind closed doors. My boss thought the entire situation was comedy gold. For months afterward, he'd joke, "Better park carefully or we'll have to call the cops again." I eventually left that job for better opportunities and upgraded to a car that doesn't randomly die during lunch breaks, but I will never forget the day a grown man weaponized law enforcement over an imaginary ownership claim to an unmarked patch of pavement. And our second story. My stepmother demanded a front row seat at my medical school graduation. When I was 8 years old, Maria started working in our house as our cleaning lady. That's how she was introduced to me anyway. "This is Maria. She helps around the house," my stepmom had said in that polite but distant tone she used with anyone she considered staff. But to me, Maria quickly became something far beyond a person who vacuumed carpets and scrubbed bathrooms. She stayed in my life from the time I was 8 until I turned 16. And in those years, she filled in gaps I didn't even know were forming. My dad worked long hours, and my stepmom was preoccupied with her own children from a previous relationship. I was the quiet kid who did well enough in school to avoid trouble, but struggled silently when things got hard. When I hit a wall in math around 5th grade, Maria noticed me crying over homework at the kitchen table. Instead of telling me to wait for a parent, she sat down beside me and patiently walked me through fractions and equations. It turned out she'd been a math teacher in her home country, but her credentials didn't transfer when she immigrated. She cleaned houses to survive. When I was lonely, she taught me how to cook simple dishes from scratch. She told me stories about her childhood, about classrooms filled with students, about leaving everything behind to give her son a better future. I don't think she ever realized how much those evenings meant to me. Or maybe she did. Maria saw potential in me long before I saw it in myself. I eventually excelled academically. I won a regional science fair in middle school and got a small write-up in the local paper. I started talking about wanting to become a doctor. Maria clipped every article, every report card, every certificate. I only found that out recently. I'm now finishing my medical residency. By coincidence, I ended up at the same hospital where her son works as a nurse. We ran into each other one night during a shift change, and after a few conversations, he casually mentioned how proud his mother had always been of me. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "You know she's been contributing to your college fund for years, right?" he asked. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Apparently for 8 years, Maria had been using half of what she earned from her other cleaning jobs to anonymously donate to my college fund. She never touched the money my dad paid her. She never said a word. She simply gave because she believed in me. The contributions had been routed in a way that I never connected back to her. I confronted her gently. We sat at her kitchen table, and I asked if it was true. She broke down in tears before she even answered. From a cabinet, she pulled out a scrapbook thick with plastic sleeves. Inside were copies of my report cards, newspaper clippings, photos from award ceremonies, and even the crumpled thank you note I'd written her when I was 10 after she helped me pass a math exam. "Seeing you work so hard," she said through tears, "helped me believe my son could do it too. When he graduated nursing school, I thought, if I could help you the same way, I should." I had no words. This woman had cleaned houses at night and given away money she could have kept, all because she saw something in an awkward kid at a kitchen table. Fast forward to now. My medical school graduation is coming up. We each get 2 VIP tickets for front row seating. I didn't hesitate. One went to my dad, the other went to Maria. When I told my stepmom, she lost it. "So I don't get a front row seat at my own child's graduation?" she demanded. "You're not being excluded," I said carefully. "There are plenty of other seats." She crossed her arms. "I raised you." That statement stopped me. She hadn't. She had lived in the same house, yes, but she wasn't there for the homework tears, the science projects, the quiet encouragement. Maria was. I'm giving 1 ticket to Dad and 1 to Maria, I repeated calmly. I raised you. She said it like it was fact, but raising someone isn't just being in the same building. It's sitting at the kitchen table through tears. It's clipping articles and saving report cards. It's giving money you don't have because you believe. Maria did that. Your stepmom just watched. She accused me of humiliating her by choosing the help over family. She said people would talk. She said I was being dramatic and ungrateful. Word spread through extended family like wildfire. My phone started lighting up with messages about respect and appearances. I was told I was creating unnecessary drama. Maria, of course, tried to diffuse it. She called me one evening and said softly, I can sit in the back. It doesn't matter where I sit. It matters to me, I told her. My dad surprised me by backing my decision fully. You earned this, he said. She helped you get there. The extended family continued to grumble about me disrespecting my stepmom, but I stopped responding. If honoring the person who sacrificed quietly for years is disrespectful, then I'll accept the label. Graduation day arrived and Maria wore a simple navy dress with a corsage pinned proudly to her shoulder. She clutched that VIP ticket like it was made of gold. When my name was called, I looked out into the audience and saw her in the front row, tears streaming down her face, hands clasped tightly together. My stepmom attended. She sat a few rows back. The ceremony went on without catastrophe, no scenes, no public embarrassment, just a woman who once cleaned houses at night watching a kid she believed in become a doctor. Afterward, when people came up to congratulate me, I introduced Maria without hesitation. This is Maria, I said. She's one of the reasons I'm here. Some family members looked uncomfortable. I didn't care. Gratitude shouldn't be hidden to preserve someone else's ego. Maria once told me that education opens doors no one can close. She opened one for me when I was 8 years old. The least I could do was make sure she had the best seat in the house when I walked through it. And our last story. I'd burn the whole house down before I'd live like that. My neighbor, 2 nights before attempting arson with a red gas can. I have what some people would politely call unconventional pets. My household includes tarantulas, several species of snakes, a very spoiled fancy mouse named Sir Squeaks-a-Lot, along with the more socially acceptable cats and dogs. I rescue specialty animals from people who buy them without research and then panic when they realize they require actual commitment. Because of that, I've dealt with plenty of judgment over the years. What I was not prepared for was my new neighbor deciding my animals were grounds for attempted arson. It started on a perfectly normal afternoon while I was walking my dog. I heard screaming a few houses down and initially assumed it was a family argument. As I got closer, I saw Ray, our HOA pest control contractor, standing awkwardly in a driveway while a woman with brightly dyed, uneven hair was absolutely shrieking at him. Her son, about 10 years old, stood in the doorway looking completely unbothered. When Ray saw me, he waved frantically like I was a lifeline. Tex, tell her we're just doing HOA perimeter pest control, he said, voice cracking with stress. I approached calmly and explained that Ray works for the HOA, and if she wasn't comfortable, she could request a service skip. She immediately snapped that Ray had scared her baby by walking near the house. Ray quickly offered to mark her down as a skip or even a partial skip like I do. That caught her attention long enough for me to explain that I request partial skips near certain windows because some of my exotic pets are sensitive to chemical sprays. The second I mentioned exotic pets, her son lit up with interest. I explained that I keep tarantulas, ball pythons, a corn snake, a king snake, and my fancy mouse. I told him I rescue animals from people who can't keep them anymore, especially since COVID displaced a lot of pet owners. The kid was fascinated. His mother looked horrified. "What kind of monsters are you keeping?" she demanded. "They're not monsters," I replied evenly. "They're just uncommon pets." "Snakes? Spiders? I'd burn the whole house down before I'd live like that." That comment hit me harder than she realized. When I was 7 years old, my childhood home burned down. My autistic brother and I barely escaped. My parents were hospitalized for months with severe burns. We lived temporarily in a back room at a fire station because no relatives could take us in. Fire isn't a joke in my world. "That's not funny," I said quietly. "You don't threaten someone's home." She sniffed and said, "Who said it was a threat?" Everything froze for a moment. Ray looked like he wanted to disappear. My dog pressed against my leg, sensing the tension. "It better be empty words," I replied calmly, because I take threats seriously. She stormed back into her house. Ray exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours and left quickly. The kid lingered just long enough to ask shyly if he could see the snake someday. I told him to ask his dad. I assumed that was the end of it. She said she'd burn your house down over spiders and snakes? That's not an opinion, that's a threat. And you made it clear you heard it. 2 nights later at 2:47 a.m., my phone erupted with motion alerts. My security cameras detected movement near my back fence. My dogs were barking aggressively. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep beside my bed and pulled up the live feed. There she was, dressed in dark clothing, hood up, trying to climb my fence. In one hand, she held a red gas can, in the other, a lighter. The motion-activated floodlights had just snapped on, freezing her mid-climb in harsh white light. I called 911 immediately. "There's a woman in my backyard attempting to set my house on fire," I said clearly. "She has a gas can and a lighter. I have camera footage." I stepped onto my back porch with the bat while staying on the line with dispatch. She had managed to get over the fence and was unscrewing the gas can cap. She turned when she heard the dogs. "I told you I'd do it," she screamed. "You and your freak animals." "Police are on the way," I said evenly. "You're on camera. Put it down." She laughed in a way that genuinely sounded unhinged and stepped toward my house. Before she could do anything else, sirens cut through the night. Multiple patrol units arrived faster than I expected. She dropped the gas can and tried to scramble back over the fence, but tripped in my flower bed. Officers entered my yard with weapons drawn and detained her immediately. She tried to claim I had threatened her first, but my camera footage showed her earlier comments and the entire attempted break-in. The gas can still had her fingerprints. Her car was parked 2 streets away. There was no ambiguity. She was charged with attempted arson, criminal trespass, and making criminal threats. Because she brought materials and attempted entry, it was classified as a felony, a serious one. Her husband filed for separation within months. Her son went to live with his grandparents. A few months later, an older man knocked on my door. He introduced himself as the boy's grandfather. He explained the situation had stabilized and asked cautiously if the offer to show his grandson the snake still stood. I said yes. The kid's visited many times since. He's gentle with the animals and asks thoughtful questions about husbandry and conservation. One afternoon, while holding a ball python, he looked up at me and said quietly, "They're not monsters." No, they're not. My house is still standing, my animals are safe, my cameras are upgraded, the floodlights are brighter, and the only thing that ended up in a cage was the woman who thought fire was a good solution to something she didn't understand. Some people hear snake and think danger. I hear gas can at 2:47 a.m. and think something else entirely. Let's talk about what each of these stories actually reveals. The parking lot guy wasn't really upset about a dead battery. He was upset that his unspoken imaginary claim to a specific patch of asphalt got violated. He escalated to calling police, demanding arrests, and stomping his foot because he had no real power and needed the state to validate his feelings. When the officer refused, he collapsed into a tantrum. That's not entitlement to a spot. That's entitlement to have everyone else enforce your personal rules. The stepmother wasn't really upset about a front row seat. She was upset that her version of raising someone, being in the same house, providing basic necessities, existing, was being compared to Maria's version, actual presence, emotional labor, financial sacrifice, and found lacking. She couldn't argue against Maria's contributions, so she argued against optics. People will talk. She wanted the appearance of motherhood without the work. The front row exposed that. The neighbor wasn't really upset about snakes and spiders. She was upset that someone lived differently than she approved of, and that her son was interested in that difference. When polite judgment didn't change anything, she escalated to threats. When threats didn't work, she escalated to action. A gas can at 2:47 a.m. isn't about pest control. It's about needing to destroy what you can't control. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.